Welcome to Technado.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of Technado. I'm your host, Don Pizzette, subbing in for Sophie. She couldn't be bothered to show up and film with us today, so, you know, I see how it is. But we will cover that somehow. I've got a great cast of characters here in the studio with me that I'll introduce in just a moment. Before I get started, I do want to thank our sponsor, ACI Learning. They are the... They're the pocketbook behind the podcast. They're what allows this to happen. They bring to you great brands like IT Pro TV, and they sponsor things like the shirt that I'm wearing right now, which I appreciate because otherwise I would, I don't know, wear a t-shirt.
Wearing a white beater.
Yeah. So definitely a big thank you to them. But let's talk about who all is here in the studio with me. Over here to my left, I've got the inimitable Daniel Lowry. Daniel?
Wow, your word of day calendar is really paying off.
I wasn't sure I'd be able to pronounce that one.
Yeah, glad to be here today. We got some really bad tech news, or not tech news, but security news. So I look forward to getting to that. Always a nightmare scenario when it comes to the security. So it's never like, hey, we did better.
Yeah, in fact, we have one article this week that is like somebody getting even worse.
Yeah.
So, we'll get to that one. But to my right, again, we are graced by the presence of Mr. Justin Dennison. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's always fun. And I don't know what we're talking about today. I'm here for like reactionary value. Like, that is nuts. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. You know, that's just that's
sort of like the Kool-Aid
sound
man.
machine that actually did stuff like that, though.
Yeah.
At one point.
Yeah, that was
Just
me.
an app.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah.
You did
I
the
made
voiceover
that.
for the sound machine.
It's all good.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I said I had some special guests with me today, and you're probably wondering who they are since I've just introduced Daniel and Justin, which is not all that special. But at the end of the table here, we got Mr. Ronnie Wong back with us. It's been a while, Ronnie, hasn't it?
It has. It's been several weeks or months. I don't even know at this point. But, yeah, no, Sophie actually asked me to step in, but I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, Ronnie doesn't know how long because we actually keep him locked in a
glass booth. Yeah. There's a glass
He's
booth
next
on
to
the
Walt
other end.
Disney.
We decant him when we need.
Wow.
I get a weird like Futurama head in a jar vibe.
Yeah, there you go.
It's pretty close.
Drop the fish food.
Yeah.
I'm there.
All right. Well, we're gonna start off like normal. Actually, Sophie does a better job at this than I do. So I'm gonna.
You see why Don asked me, do you want to do that? I'm like, no, I do not.
All right. Well, I will try and remember everything. First half of the show, we do our tech news, and there's actually been a lot of stuff out. Let's jump over. This first one brought to you by the folks over at Tom's Hardware. Microsoft says the days of free Windows 7 to 10 or 11 updates are over. This is my favorite headline because it barely makes sense.
Yeah.
But what they're telling us is for years now, you have been able to upgrade just about any version of Windows to Windows 11 for free. So if you had Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, if it was a shady license that was a sticker on a computer you found in the trash, like you can install that and they would let you upgrade legit to Windows 11.
It's like an immunity deal, right?
It really was. Yeah.
And I just cop to the crimes and give us some information. We'll be happy to let you go.
Yeah, I don't really know what possessed Microsoft to do that. I think it was to drive up their user numbers for their Microsoft 365. You know, they wanted to get those online accounts created, which Windows 11 forces you to do. But they're telling us that the free ride is over. Now, they actually said the free ride was over back on July 29th. And now here we are in October. It's been months. They had a grace period. And they're saying that grace period is over. Windows 10 keys will still activate in Windows 11, but the upgrades from Windows 7, Windows 8, that is done.
Question. This is my first question that pops in my head about this. If I haven't upgraded yet, was I waiting for something? Like, what makes them think that this is like a detriment to me? Because, now it's over.
No.
You waited too long.
No, here's what it is. The people who haven't upgraded yet, they also didn't read this article or hear any of the things. It was, it's some like old computer at a little grandma or grandpa.
Yeah.
7's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I play solitaire. This is all good. And then,
Plus, they removed the pinball game after 7, wasn't it?
you know what?
Didn't even know it was
Windows
still in
10.
7.
Then why would you update?
Yeah. That's a good question. That game is amazing.
Yeah, I think that you still have those people that say, hey, Windows 7 is the best operating system I ever had, and they're never going to upgrade. And of course, at some point, the requirements for you having a computer, Windows 7 is just not going to be able to run on them. I mean, that's what we're going to probably find out.
You think Microsoft will ever release Windows 7 code for like open source and let people just kind of like run with it and become an open source project?
You know, historically, Microsoft has never released any of the source code for Windows
That's true.
intentionally. It's happened accidentally.
It has happened. Well, accidentally is a fun way to say it. But
However, Microsoft does have, and this is an unofficial thing, but they do turn a blind eye to websites that post their older operating systems for retro purposes. So I think it's called WinSite. I might be wrong on that, but there's a website you can go to download retro software. Not everyone's like me and has their retro software on the shelf behind them. But you can go and download like old copies of DOS 622 and Windows 3.1, Windows 95, Windows 98, and for all intents and purposes, that's piracy. But Microsoft is aware of that site and says, no, you're posting it for retro purposes. It's not like we can make money off of Windows 98 anymore.
Nintendo should listen to these people, right?
Nintendo does not do that.
Nintendo has zero tolerance policy.
Yeah. So over time, Windows 2000, I believe, is on that site, but Windows 2003, like the server stuff is not on there. And so there is a line. So eventually that line, I think, will cross Windows 7. I don't think it's there yet because you could legit run Windows 7 today. But I'll tack on to what Justin's comment was. There's people that if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Upgrades are a bit of a pain. But I think what will usher these people to upgrade is when they get hit by ransomware.
Yeah. It just reminds me of all the infrastructure that runs on like various old Linux don't touch it. It's all good. The Windows 7 real quick, and I'm just been out of the loop. Don't use Windows 7. Is it still receiving like security updates and stuff?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So update.
No,
Yeah.
I think even they did the special program for the U.S. government where I believe it was the Navy that bought 3 extra years. I believe even that's up now. I don't think that there are reliable updates for Windows 7. I could be wrong on that.
Gotcha.
But for regular people, it's absolutely over.
Yep.
Ronnie and I actually looked up yesterday, did a Shodan search for how many devices were running Windows 2000 server and Windows 2003 server. And I think it was around 16,000 each, right around that for
That's
both
impressive.
of them. Yeah. Most of them were in Boca Raton or like Palm Beach or somewhere down in South Florida. Yeah.
Really?
My comment stands.
Like by far in the U.S.
Yeah. All right.
Old grandpa.
Yeah, old grandmas. That's exactly what I thought. It's like, it's a bunch of old people that don't upgrade.
Yeah.
But this was server.
It could be city governments.
Yeah.
Schools that just aren't updating
That
for
are
whatever
run by
reason.
old people.
Yeah, that are.
Hey, Tom. You update that server? Heck no.
It could
Good
be
man.
some kind of embedded systems as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Right.
those misidentify.
Yeah, that's true.
And I know we had those the video switches from Grass Valley where they're
They had a
panels,
Windows 7.
embedded.
Yeah.
And
And I hacked the piss out of it.
yeah, people will look at that and be like, it's embedded, it's safe, we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yes. Like I did it with Metasploit. It was like click, put the okay, we're in.
That was easy.
That was super easy.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it was fun.
Well, anyhow, if you are banking on a free upgrade to Windows 11, your timer is according to Microsoft, it's up. Now, the folks over at Tom's Hardware did a test, and they were still able to do an upgrade as of the filming of this podcast. But that timer is almost over. So you need to do it right away if you want a freebie. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay. And they do sell it. I believe it's $100 to upgrade. And they're working on a new subscription service where you can subscribe to Windows, and then you'll always get the latest version. But we'll see how that goes.
And now you said it was just up in July, but according to this, it was up in July of 2016. The offer officially ended July of 2016. And so it's been over just a little bit longer.
That's a big grace period.
Yeah, that was
It's fine. 7 years.
I mean,
yeah.
What's funny is I've done an update like last year. So good thing I got in before the wire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
It was a close one.
Yeah. So interesting stuff right there. But all right, let's jump on over to our next article. We're going to go over to the world of Linux for this one. It is October, And like it is every April and October, it's time for the latest release of Canonical's Ubuntu operating system. Ubuntu 23.10 is about to drop.
I thought Ubuntu was a character in Terminator.
Could be. 23.10 will be releasing later this month. I think it's around the 23rd or 25th, somewhere around there that it's going to release. But when it does, standard reminder, it's an odd numbered year and it's an October release. That means this is a short-term support release. This is only going to have 6 months of support, which means come April of 2024. So when 24.04 comes out, that will be the next long-term support. So this is really a preview of what we're going to see in April, which makes it a little bit exciting. Normally we skip over the short-term releases, but here's a preview of what we got coming in the future. Some of the quick features, let me just highlight what's important on this one. They're promoting as the big feature is their all new App Store. They've completely rewritten the App Store in Flutter. We had the main engineer for Flutter on the podcast.
Yeah,
didn't we,
a while back. Yeah, that was a while back. That was when I was still a regular on the podcast.
He was like the creator of Flutter, wasn't he?
Or like a core dev.
Yeah, he was big.
Go back and check through the library. He was there. I remember Peter was there, I think, and you were there. And
so Flutter is pretty awesome, and apparently the people at Canonical think so too. And so they have completely re-architected the App Store in that. Now, I personally don't use their App Store. I just,
I was getting ready to ask, they have an App Store?
Yeah.
Because if you use apps from the command line, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Works pretty well.
Ubuntu has a GUI? That's weird.
Now, I could be nefarious on this one and say they're pushing the App Store because it hides the fact when you're installing a snap versus a real application.
Don loves snaps.
Yeah. But on the, I think I've been pretty vocal on that one. The snaps are garbage. So for our network engineers out there and people that have to support Ubuntu in production environments, there is one change that's really important. So they are changing the security model for PPAs. When you install Ubuntu, it includes a certain set of repositories that you can install packages from, and you can add third-party repositories to your heart's content. You just have to create a config file for it, and off you go. It's not a hard thing to do. Up until now, multiple repositories could share the same digital signing key. And to improve security, Ubuntu is changing it so that now every repository has to have its own signing key. Now, a lot of times when you're adding a repo, it's just one server, so it's one key anyway, so you won't notice the difference. But there are times, like with Canonical's own repositories, where there might be a security fix repo, a feature update repo, and so on, different ones for different purposes. Those will no longer be able to share keys. So that's something that you want to start planning for today. If you know that you use multiple repos from the same vendor, the way you define those starting in 23.10 is going to be different. Now, it's possible this could roll back before 24.04, but I think it's really unlikely because I tested it out and it works fine. So I couldn't spot any flaws in it. It's just something that we need to be aware of if we're going to be doing a deployment. If you're using something to automate deployment of Ubuntu servers, when you bump up to 23.10 or 24.04, some of your repos might not work.
Yeah, this is, I noticed playing around with Ubuntu a couple of weeks ago, like this seems to be an add-on to like the add apt key, like helper thing. They're like, don't use this anymore.
Yeah.
Like you should use GPG, like the native tool set, and then just like use T and add it to this file. And then all your repos should be pointed to that key. I'm guessing it was a setup of like, hey, we're going to make you have separate keys for these.
Yeah. Supply chain attacks.
Yep.
We've covered them, maybe not every week, but they seem to happen a heck of a lot. We're actually going to cover
very
one
popular.
this week. They really are. Yeah. Some of the biggest, like the SolarWinds exploit that rocked the U.S. government, those are oftentimes tied to the update paths that are performed. So having this be more secure, I think, is a valuable feature. All right. So,
any other cool features? I mean, you said a couple of features. I was like, are there any other things?
So those are the ones that I thought mattered, but I guess let me cover ones that other people think matter.
Okay.
There is an emphasis on better tiling. I don't know. Do any of you guys run Windows 11?
I do.
I do at home. Yeah.
Okay. Windows 11 has some great tiling stuff in it.
It does.
So if you have a window that's not maximized and you float your cursor over the maximize button, you get like little previews of you want to go on the left side of the screen, right side, up in the quarters. It gives you quadrants and all. If you do throw something on the left side of the screen, it kind of gives you suggestions on what could go on the right side of the screen. That's some slick stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. Well, Ubuntu is starting to bake that in, and I shouldn't say Ubuntu. GNOME is starting to bake that in, and Ubuntu defaults to using GNOME 20-something, 45, GNOME 45.
You know, it's easy to kind of overlook the user interface, like the user experience. But I'm always kicking around with different versions of Linux, especially with all the different security flavored Linux that are out there. And a lot of them I will ditch, even if they have great tooling and stuff like that, just because my experience with the interface sucks.
Yeah.
Like dark text on dark background, or everything's in dark mode except the title bar, and it's bright white. And you're like, what the hell is this? What is with this weird coloring and theming? And yeah, you can get in the guts of the thing and change all that, but it's like, why did you do this at all? Like, why is it not just, I don't know.
I made chocolate chip cookies, but I didn't put any sugar in it.
Yeah.
Like it kind of feels like a half-baked idea. Yeah. This is another thing. I haven't tried it recently. This was something that drove me crazy. So Windows 11 has this, and then every time I try to do it on a Mac, they're like, oh, you need an extra application, or you need to install or pay for something. I'm like, I just want this window on the left side, and I want this window on the right side. I think there's native ways to do that now, but it's not hover over the maximize key easily. I think it might be there to some extent, but it is. I do like that feature a great deal.
Ronnie, what was the Mac app that you and I used? It had a name like Momo or Moom or something like that. It had that let us do Windows tiling.
Yeah, I remember.
I think it might have been Moom.
It was something like that. So it was window tiling in Mac. I'm going to search for it. Engineers, developers, and I don't know if you've experienced this one, Justin, but have you ever heard of the i3 window manager?
Yeah, i3, and then there's a couple of other ones that are being pushed for Mac only that have come to recent. I forget the names of them, but yeah.
So if you are a hardcore engineer, and I mean the kind of engineer that would use like a text editor as your UI, the really nutso Richard Stallman
you're an
types.
Emacs user.
Yeah. So if you're super hardcore, there is a window manager called i3, and i3 forces everything to be tiled. You are not allowed to have overlapping windows. It's not even supposed to have things go in the background. Like things are tiled. That's how it works. So you can have your source code and your application and so on. And there are some developers that swear by this thing. It is a freaking nightmare. And it is so like anti-user.
Like, hold on now.
Well, no, I'm not. So the i3 is very rigid. There's like some good compromises in recent tooling where it's like, yeah, you can do that. But then in combination with like virtual desktops or whatever, or multiple, desktop, like you go, well, here's all my tiles for my text editors or source code tools. Here's all my tiles for my, browsing windows and things like that. And so I think that's a good compromise. But I played with i3 a little bit, and that was it. I threw it away.
I threw it away.
So with the new tiling changes in 23.10, it gives you some of that i3 functionality without the insane, crazy rules. Yeah. So if you wanted to operate in tiled mode, you drop things in their tiles. It does a tile group. Everything's grouped together, and you get the effect of i3. But then when you want to break the rules and do something like, God forbid, check your email real quick, you can pop a window up on top and break the rules and do it. So I think that's good. I did find it on the Mac. There's software called Moom, M-O-O-M. And honestly, it should just be base functionality in the OS, but it gives that functionality in a Mac.
Stands for Move and Zoom Windows.
Yeah, I guess that makes
they
sense.
don't have a very large marketing department.
Yeah. I think the app costs like $6 or something when I bought it forever ago.
Moom.
There's another one
Got it. Yeah.
called Bartender. Any of you guys use Bartender?
No.
So in newer versions of Mac, I don't know if you guys get this, but in your system bar up at the top of the screen, it gets icon crazy. And there's so many of them, they overlap. Bartender lets you take over that and choose which apps show up, which ones are hidden, and manage it. That should be in the base OS too. Like those are. I'm gonna sound like a commercial.
Yeah,
I need to get commission for this.
Yeah.
But if you run a Mac, check out Moom and Bartender. They are essential.
Make your life a little easier.
And these are applications, not like random local bars or anything like
Yeah,
that.
they're in the App Store. They're packaged with my malware. I mean, support
And this is
services.
Apple App Store,
SourceForge.com.
not
SourceForge.
the Ubuntu App
Yeah.
Store.
Right.
So make sure we differentiate there.
Although with Flutter, in theory, the app could run in both places.
It could.
All right. Anything else? What else is there?
That's it.
Software updates.
Honestly, I usually don't mess with these .10 releases just because I'm like, oh, cool. Now I need to update again. And I've worked a couple of systems just going, yeah, I run the upgrade. Oh, it's broke. Oops. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to reinstall anyway. So,
I gotta reinstall.
yeah.
I always view the .10s as a preview,
Yeah.
right? Especially the ones before an even year.
Yeah.
So we know a long-term support is about to come out. What you see in 2310 is the final proving ground of what's going to make it into that LTS version. All right, let's jump on to what I would say is arguably the biggest news of the week. A little bit outside of what we normally cover, but important for technology people. The Raspberry Pi Foundation did something completely unexpected this week.
They released a bunch of Raspberry Pis.
So they've been working better on that.
Yeah.
And what Daniel's alluding to is it's been borderline impossible
Yep. Yeah.
to find. Like, you can get Taylor Swift tickets easier than you can get a Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigs of RAM.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And if you do buy it, it's usually in a back alley with a guy in a trench coat. He's
Yeah.
like, I got the Raspberry Pis for you. Here's what you need.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't think.
Yeah.
Oh, I need that one. Yeah, I need that one. Yeah, the 5. Tell me all about it, Don.
Yeah. So they recently have gotten a little bit better about supply chain. And so you actually can get a Raspberry Pi 4 now. I ordered an 8 gig one just a few weeks ago. Of course, because the new version was coming out. But then they shocked us all by announcing the Raspberry Pi 5, which is obviously better than the 4 because it's
5.
It's got a 5.
5.
Instead of a 4. 5 is greater than 4.
All right, now
That's how numbers work.
before we dive into this one too far, because there's some people who are probably wondering, like, why do I care about Raspberry Pis? There are so many ways to use these things. It's crazy. So I thought I'd ask each of you, because I know all of you use them at some point or another. Like, what is one way that you have used a Raspberry Pi? Either, it doesn't have to be like production use, just some way that you found it useful. Ronnie, do you have one?
I was thinking, I don't have anyone besides what we've done in production, which is to display some of the charts that we'd actually have in the business up on our screens.
Oh, yeah, like stick it in a kiosk mode and it's hooked up to a TV. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I've run clusters to play around with Docker Swarm and Kubernetes, and I've also done some like small automations with them. And then I've broken a couple by using horrible power supplies. So those are the 3
That
ways.
is true.
Don't make sure you have a good power supply for. I think it's better in the newer versions. This was like a Raspberry Pi 2, and I was like, this doesn't come on anymore. Interesting.
Yeah, because they can pull a couple of amps when they're cranking.
Yep.
You got to have a power supply for that.
Yep.
I have a Raspberry Pi 4 in a closet in my house that runs a handful of containers for me. My wireless access points need a controller software, and so I run that as a container. I have a virtual tabletop that I run for D&D night, and that runs in a container on the Ras Pi. A handful of little like microservices, and they just run on that thing. It sits in a closet. It's like having a server, and it's got enough juice to do it. Incredibly useful.
I have a Raspberry Pi 4 that I use as Pi-hole for DNS syncholing, and I also have a Raspberry Pi W2, which is the little
tiny one, yeah.
tiny guy, which I turned into like a piece of like red team kit where I can just plug it into your network and it gives me reverse shell. So almost kind of like a land turtle, but it cost me like $25. Yeah. And you can't get a land turtle, so
Yeah,
They're
land turtle's a
always sold
bit
out.
overpriced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know several people who use it as like their home automation,
Yeah.
like for Home Assistant or something like that. Like, hey, I just have it sitting. I think the big plus for me is there's no fans. Like, it's not cranking. It doesn't get really hot. If you stack 5 of them together, can confirm they will get hot.
Yeah. Yep. Now, the Raspberry Pi Foundation did upset a lot of people that during the supply chain where it got difficult to get a hold of these devices, they struck a deal that any new stock was made available to commercial vendors and not to individuals. That they had been working deals for like smart TVs to use Raspberry Pis and laptops and things of that nature. And so they took care of them and not the makers that helped to get them where they are. So some people are boycotting the Raspberry Pi 5, but it does have some improvements. Slightly faster processor. So now it's 2.4 gigahertz over the 2 to 2.2 that you used to get. It's not a giant leap. It can support decoding 4K at 60 hertz, which is fairly impressive for such a small box.
Dual 4Ks.
What's that?
It says dual 4Ks.
Yeah. And the dual 4K, that's kind of important. So they've added some stuff to the board in the 5 that makes it worthwhile for an upgrade. And there's 3 features in particular that I want to call out. So first off is the one Ronnie mentioned. There's a special ribbon cable adapter on a Raspberry Pi 4 that allows you to hook an external display up to it. The Raspberry 5 now has 2 of those connectors. It also has the 2 HDMI connectors. So you can do the ribbon cable to a touchscreen, or you can do the output to HDMI, and you can do high resolution, which is pretty impressive. So that's one thing that they've upgraded. The second thing is they've added a PCIe 2.0 port. I don't know if any of you guys have messed with external storage on the Raspberry Pis. If it's a USB key, it works fine. But all the ones that allow you to attach an SSD are pretty kludgy.
Yeah. So I wanted to. I was like, oh, man, this would be nice. I'll have me a nice little storage device on my network, blah, blah, blah. And then after reading, I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to mess with it. Because every article I read at the time, I'm not saying it's like this, was a little bit different. And there was like borderline magic sometimes.
Yeah.
You're like, what you do is you put this in here and you boot it, and then you pull this out, and then you plug this up, and then, and then you cross your fingers and you knock on wood and hope the druid fairies make it work.
Yep. So the main reason that was such a challenge is they would usually have some kind of SATA controller that was then converted to USB, and it would hijack one of your USB ports. And so that just was not a recipe for success. It caused a lot of boot problems. It was really hard to boot from SSD or external storage at all. Well, now we've got a dedicated PCIe 2.0 port, which means we can have fast peripherals. And the intention is for storage, but you could use it for other things. But storage is the main thing. And then the third upgrade is they've moved to their own in-house developed GPU. So they have what's called the Video Core VII or 7 GPU. My understanding is it was in-house developed, so I don't know how they got to 7 so fast. But that means they licensed the technology. But either way, if you've messed with any of the GPUs in prior ones, like let's say you set up a RetroPie or something like that on a Raspberry Pi, the video card drivers have been janky as all get out. Like they sort of work, they sort of don't. Now it's a fully documented open video chipset. And so we'll have better graphics support coming out of it. That's partly why they can support the extra monitors and other things.
Does this OpenCL? Does it support OpenCL? Does it talk anything about that?
I don't know. It specifically mentioned Vulkan on the graphics side, but I don't know about OpenCL.
I was just wondering, like for like a test bed for playing around with like a general purpose GPU kind of thing. But.
Yeah, I know the NVIDIA. Is it called the Jetson? Like that board is considered the standard for test beds doing compute and so on. I don't think Raspberry Pi was trying to target that because they always try and keep their price point down. So I don't know. I will say they backed off of a few things they haven't done in the past. Like they try and keep these things inexpensive, right? And they still are. The Raspberry 5 is priced, I think it's $5 more expensive than the Raspberry Pi 4. But there's little things like the Raspberry Pi 4 didn't have a real-time clock, which was annoying. So every time you boot it up, you had no idea what time was going to show up on it until it's synchronized with an NTP server. Now it's got a built-in RTC. And it's little things like that make a big difference.
Have either of you played with alternatives to Raspberry Pi, like Banana Pi or Orange Pi?
Or BeagleBone or Odroids or any of that? So I looked into some of those because I was like, oh, I'll get a couple more Raspberry Pi because I wanted to set up Home Assistant.
And then that was like,
I was like, oh, I can't find any. Hey, here's a reseller. I think I'll just get a NUC if I'm going to pay that much for it.
Like $300.
I haven't really played with any of them just because it didn't come along, but I have been intrigued by a few of them just for like the hardware provided for the given price point. But
see what kind of performance you get out of it versus a Raspberry.
The challenge I've run into with those, I've tried a few, is if you use the OS provided by the vendor, it works fine, right?
Hmm.
But when you start to look at other OSs, like, can I just go to Canonical and get their Ubuntu and throw it on there? Then it starts to get flaky, right? And the problem is that the vendors tend not to support their OSs very well. So if you're happy with that OS and that's what you want to stick with, then they work fine and you can certainly use them. But Raspberry Pi has a great ecosystem around them, and there's tons of options. You can get Fedora, Ubuntu, you can get all sorts of distros that are out there. You can roll your own. The hardware is all commonly supported.
And even Raspbian OS is like supported fairly well comparatively.
It's way better now than it used to be.
Oh yeah, I remember today. Click. I better go get me a sandwich. Let that go ahead and get up. But it's a lot better, and hardware helps a great deal. I have not played with the PoE stuff. That seems intriguing to me for some reason.
Yeah, there were some weird announcements on PoE. So in the Raspberry Pi forum earlier, you had to get a PoE hat, so an extra board to stick on if you wanted to do PoE for it. In the Raspberry Pi 5, it's still a hat, but it's weird. It's like shaped like an L, and it's designed to go on there and still leave room to add other things. Cooling was a big problem. Like when you put the hat on before, you couldn't stick a fan in there. It blocked the fan. Now it's shaped like an L to leave room for the fan. And that's something they haven't really talked about yet. And I pre-ordered one of these so I can test it myself. It sounds like the Raspberry Pi 5 is going to run a lot hotter than previous versions.
Even talk about some of the different accessories there, such as active cooling, and they do have all that stuff in there now that you can add on.
It's USB-C?
It is for power. Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm so... Don't have to guess which way to turn things. I just love it. And then the what was it? It was the micro USB before, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I borked a couple of my boards, because I was like, hey, this plugs in. Click. Oh, that doesn't work anymore. So
I don't think you didn't have to guess with the old one. You just knew you were wrong, right?
Yeah. Whatever way you went, it was wrong.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's broke.
Yeah.
I added like heat sinks to mine just because I had them stacked up in a cluster, and that did help. I'm a big fan of not having like turbines running in my closet, so I'm hoping these active cooling solutions, maybe a small whir or something like that.
Yeah.
But
All right. Well, like I said, I have pre-ordered some of these, so I'll test some out and see what we can do. And if you follow our YouTube channel, then at Christmas time we're going to be doing a 12 Days of IT Christmas giveaway. And at a minimum, I've pre-ordered them. I should have them by then. Assuming I get my hands on them, we will give away at least one Raspberry Pi in our Christmas giveaway. So that's a easy way if you're that one lucky person to upgrade.
Right.
Everybody else losers. All right, gentlemen. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap for our tech news segment. We still have a lot coming up as we jump into cybersecurity in the second half, so stay tuned. But otherwise, we'll be back after these messages.
Tired of trying to schedule your team's time around in-person learning? Isn't it a bummer to spend thousands of dollars on travel for professional development? What if we said you can save money and time and still provide your team with the best training possible? The answer to your woes is live online training from ACI Learning. With live online training, we provide our top in-person courses in private, online, instructor-led formats. You get to provide professional development in a manner that fits today's expectations. Entertaining, convenient, and effective. Our exam-aligned courses inspire the full potential of your team. Visit virtual instructor-led training at ACI Learning for more info.
Welcome back to Technado, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Our first half was tech news, but now we're going to switch gears over to cybersecurity, the area that we have no shortage of. Preparing for this podcast, half my time is really spent sifting through the cybersecurity articles because there's so many that are out there.
I would assume it's kind of like when you're looking for tech articles, it's like, man, I really hope to find a good one. And then when you get to cybersecurity, like, I really hope I can trim this.
Sometimes it's difficult. Yeah. Like we probably could convert to a straight up cybersecurity podcast, but there's plenty of those that are out there. So I don't want
to compete.
Yep.
I just have this weird image of like you remember those fax bulletins when fax machines were still a thing and they just randomly come through? If it was cybersecurity, you just be like, hey, it's just a room full of paper.
Yeah.
Like
I'm out of ink.
Out of paper.
Every time I come in there, I'm like, what are we going to do with all of this stuff?
Yeah.
This stuff is burning. So
you have to get the old school tractor fed printers. Remember those?
Yeah.
And you just feed out the whole box.
Probably would.
All right. Well, let's jump to our first one. This one comes to us from the folks over at Ars Technica. A new Chrome 0 day is sending the internet into a new chapter of Groundhog Day. New. All right. So for this one, it's an interesting one because the exploit is bad, I suppose, right? So there is a vulnerability in VP8 images. And so if you go to a website that contains an image that's encoded with VP8, which is honestly not all that common right now.
I was going to say.
But if you do hit that, the image could be configured to contain a payload that would get executed by your browser. Now, some of that happens in the browser sandbox, so not that big of a deal, but some of it can escape, and that is a big deal. If this sounds familiar, it was almost identical that there was a similar CVE just about 3 weeks ago. I'm not entirely sure that we reported on it because the usage of VP8 is not as great as it will be in the future. I think I skipped over that article. But the reason I bring it up today is not so much that I want to focus on VP8. What I want to focus on is a little change that Google has made when they announced this. When they announced the previous vulnerability, they said, look, we got a vulnerability in Chrome. It's significant. We need to rush an update out. And they pushed an update out for their Chromebooks and for Chrome itself to update. But it turns out the vulnerability wasn't just in Chrome. It was in the library they were using to render these VP8 images and videos. I keep saying images, but it's images and videos. And that library had a vulnerability, and that library was used by a lot of other projects. And so people felt like Google should have highlighted that because there were other projects using the VP8 library that didn't know they had a vulnerability. They didn't know they needed to update, and time went on. And then these were some big ones. The big one that I saw was VLC. Tons of people use VLC. I say that.
I use VLC.
Yeah. It's my go-to. I'm like,
Absolutely.
this doesn't play correctly.
Listen,
VLC seems to work.
If you want it to play, put it
VLC.
in VLC.
Unless it's a VP8, apparently.
I believe I could open toast with VLC, man.
Yeah.
It will
And
run
if that toast is encoded with VP8, it could go bad.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, how do they, like, do you remember the old days? If you had a DVD player in your computer and you wanted to watch a DVD, you had to have a program that had a DVD codec to be able to play it. So you had to buy something until the DCSS thing and whatever. How does VLC get around all the codec licensing?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't, it's not for me to wonder why, Don,
I'm
but just to enjoy the
taking
product.
advantage of it.
Listen, I don't get in my car and go, I wonder how this starts.
Yeah.
Like, I just go with it.
A
And it works.
combustion engine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, I think the landscape has changed a little bit. Aren't a lot of those codecs, they aren't necessarily as locked down as they used to be, right?
Some of them have fallen out of copyright, like their copyright window ended or trademark or whatever it is that they're protected under. But not all of them. You know, is it Fraunhofer that had the MP3 codec for the longest time?
Oh, I don't remember.
That one's now gone into the public domain, and so you can play that. But VLC was playing it before it was in public domain.
Yeah.
I think
VLC had two birds up yelling, "What up?"
I do think they're a little bit less concerned with some of that. But either way, VLC was one. Adobe, various Adobe products used this. Android used it. Skype, which does anybody use Skype anymore?
What's Skype?
Yeah. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
What Skype is?
I think I purged that from my brain.
Yeah.
Skype is a textbook demonstration of what happens when a large corporation buys a good idea.
Gotcha.
So it serves as an example, I think.
Yes, it does.
That's its purpose.
That's right.
But it also supports VP8. So this time, when Google had a 0 day, they took the extra step of saying, yes, there's a vulnerability. Yes, it affects Chrome and Chromebooks, Chromium, all their stuff. But it also affects this library, and they publish that so people know. So other projects that are out there that use these libraries can be aware of it. And Justin, I'm glad we have you on the show because you are a resident developer person.
Yeah.
And I imagine you deal with libraries pretty regular.
Yeah. It's funny. I have become more and more kind of paranoid about those kind of. I'm like, yeah, this works, but is it up to something no good? Or like building software is hard, and it's really easy to do it incorrectly, and then it just goes everywhere. And then you end up with stuff like this, and go, I don't know how that happened. I do. It's hard to do it well, and you weren't doing it well. So, yeah.
The hard truth.
Yeah. And I'm not immune to it. I'm definitely like, oh yeah, I guess that technically is a SQL injection right there. Oops. So Daniel and I were talking about this article. I was like, what is VP8, man?
Well, it was the libvpx library, right? That's what we looked up. It says libvpx is a free software video codec library from Google and the Alliance for Open Media. It serves as the reference software implementation for the VP8 and VP9 video coding formats and for AV1, a special fork named libaom that was stripped of backwards compatibility.
I think I've been out of the. I think I've just got so used to going double click on video. Hey, it runs.
Yeah, look
cool.
at videos.
I don't even know anything about these things.
So it was a product of the licensing wars, right? So remember, like I mentioned a few minutes ago with Fraunhofer and MP3.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was the OGG Vorbis format. Do you guys remember OGG?
That, yeah.
It's still out there. It's
still,
not gone,
yeah.
but people talk about it that way, like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Where
Never forget.
people said, look, we need a somewhat lossy format that can compete with MP3 that doesn't have all these license restrictions around it. And basically in the video world, we needed that too, because you had it was like what was it the AV I used? Well, like H.264 and all that was using the MP4 codecs inside of it, and then Apple started pushing theirs, which I don't remember what it's called, something. All their stuff starts with an A.
or something. A4.
Yeah.
Yes, some weird thing.
I don't remember what it was, but they all had licensing restrictions around it. And so Google helped to fund an open source initiative to start creating some video codecs that weren't restricted for that. And what they really wanted it for was HTML5 apps. You know, if you wanted something embedded in a website, you wanted to be able to play video and have it support multiple platforms, it needed to be open source. I think one of the initial movers for it was you couldn't watch Netflix on Linux machines. And there was video codec problems and DRM problems.
Was that the same thing that played YouTube on some Linux distro? Like, you would try to open up YouTube and like it wouldn't stream?
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you didn't know if your Linux distro was going to have codecs because they wouldn't include closed source software and codecs that had to be licensed. Like your Linux distros had to stay on the up and up. And so the initiative was created to create a video encoded or an encoding format that wasn't. I'm trying to remember the right word. Encumbered. That's it. That wasn't license encumbered.
Word of the day.
There we go. Inimitable and unencumbered.
So interesting thing. I was reading through the comments of this article, and the comments, they started talking a lot about memory safe browsers. And I can't wait for the day when memory safe browsers are like a thing. And someone mentioned Servo. Apparently, so I looked up this Servo, an embeddable, independent, memory safe, modular, parallel web rendering engine.
Isn't that, is that a Mozilla product?
I don't see that.
I know Tom Servo.
I know Tom Servo. Yeah.
So maybe this is me being a little cynical. When someone goes, it's memory safe, I go, I bet it's not.
I'll take that bet.
Yeah. You just ain't found anybody to make it not memory safe yet. Because that's very hard to do. And it's always up and up, but I mean, hopefully it is. Servo rings a bell, though. The server rendering engine. Is that what you said? Yeah, I want to. Is it written in Rust?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
That's what I've been hearing. It's like
It
Rust.
is the new hotness.
Everything should just be in Rust at this point because it's memory safe.
Yeah, they say that. Don't get me wrong. I love Rust. It is finicky sometimes. You're like, hey. This doesn't behave like that, but it does do a lot of things to keep you from doing like, hey, I'm referencing deallocated memory or whatever.
And it smacks your hands.
There is still ways to get memory unsafety in Rust, so that's why I was asking.
Gotcha.
So.
Well, at the end of the day, regardless of whether you use Google's products or not, or whether you like or hate VP8, it is nice to see them starting to acknowledge the libraries that are impacted. And I kind of view it as giving back to the community, right? They're supporting that library developer by saying, here's a vulnerability, you need to patch this, and any product that depends on that needs to update it. If you store your source code in GitHub, things like Dependabot will help you detect these and make sure you're doing your updates, so it helps the community all around. All right, let's jump over to our next article, which is, I forgot to do the segment on that last one. Oh, my bad.
That was a Deja News.
That was a Deja News. This next article is Who Got Pwned?
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
Fatality.
Yeah!
All right, little tongue in cheek on this one, because who got pwned this week is somebody who's actually already pwned. It's just continuing to extend and grow and get worse. We need a segment on
Who got pwned more?
yeah, or could it get any worse?
Ponied.
Yeah,
No.
who's still
Oh,
getting
no.
pwned?
All right, so this time it is Progress Software. If that name doesn't sound familiar to you, their file transfer utility MoveIt has been the center of a massive supply chain attack that has impacted some really big corporations and government entities all over the world. So pretty hard to escape this one in the news cycle. We've covered it here on the podcast. Well, they have a number of other products in their portfolio, one of which is WSFTP. Now, if you've not heard of WSFTP, I don't blame you, because most people don't use FTP anymore. It's
Right.
not secure. But WSFTP is one of the original Windows-based FTP servers. It stands for WinSock File Transfer Protocol. I ran WSFTP for the first time on like Windows NT4.
Whoa.
So
it's
in
been
the
around a hot minute.
in the late
Mhm.
90s. Yeah. And I don't know that it had just come out back then. Like, it had probably been out for a little while. So this is software that's been around for literal decades. And if you're in a Windows environment, your Windows machine doesn't include an FTP server. You have that janky stuff through IIS. That doesn't really count. So if you needed a quick and easy FTP server with a GUI to manage it, WSFTP was one of your go-tos. And so there's a lot of small and medium businesses that would leverage this in the past. I say in the past, you really shouldn't be using FTP for anything today, even stuff you don't care about. Like, it's just so much easier to use SSH to do file transfers and SFTP. But people do. And WSFTP has been updated to support SFTP and FTPS, which is a weird one. I don't know why anyone would use that. But it turns out that MoveIt wasn't the extent of the compromise for Progress Software, that there is a already exploited, that's not the right word, an exploit that is being used in the wild for WSFTP. They've released a patch, so if you do the update, you've got it. But if you're the kind of company that's running FTP software still after all these years, you're probably not the kind of company that applies updates on a regular basis.
So same people running Windows 7.
Yes.
Yep, that's probably. So I'm glad you explained what WS meant, because given this title of this article, I was like, what sucky FTP? Hopefully you don't get a cease and desist after that one. But
So fun, Justin, this is something I have been, we just talked about this yesterday because we're filming OWASP Top 10 for 2021, and we talked about deserialization attacks. This is a .NET deserialization in one of the major CVEs for this specific piece of software. And that's a lot of fun, because that makes, you could probably go, hey, while you're doing that, do this too. And it goes, okay, that sounds fun. I'll get that taken care of for you. You're like, awesome.
that's another one of those things where, like, when you're developing, you don't really think about it. You go, well, no, it's fine. And then someone goes, well, what if I have it do this too? And you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. That's, oops. Tricky ones.
Yeah.
Tricky ones.
Tricky indeed.
Interesting.
Now, the group that is exploiting this the most, right? Because anybody can exploit it now. It's out there in the wild. But the group that is pushing this the most is doing something kind of interesting. It is said that, according to the Register, that the ransoms that they are demanding, which are getting paid, are significantly higher than the standard ransoms that are out there. In fact, they list the average as being around $740,000 once they've gained a foothold in your environment. So
That's a bit of money.
expensive mistake to make.
Yes, it is.
Sometimes I wish I did not have a conscience,
Yeah.
because that's a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That's funny.
I can't do that.
No.
But I'm like, I see the appeal.
I did see a technical error in the Register's article that was talking about the Bishop Fox silver. It's not silver, it's sliver.
Oh,
Yeah.
The
Pesky
sliver,
spell check.
yeah, sliver C2 is
So
it's
according to
open
that,
source.
right?
Yeah.
They're saying that they took a tool
Mhm.
that company developed and exploited this. Is that what?
So they used an open source C2 framework for command and control. So what happens is when they exploit the WSFTP deserialization vulnerability, or they had some sort of like unauthorized upload where you could get remote code execution or remote command execution. It would then reach out for stage 2, which was the implant or it's like an implant. It's basically the thing that allows you to now start talking the beacon for Sliver. Okay. And now, okay, cool. I have now command and control over that device. So its first order of business is to reach out to a C2 framework and say, hey, give me the software I need to install so that I can run and give you, remote command and control. So Sliver has become very, very popular because I think we talked about this last week. Things like Brute Retell and Cobalt Strike. Yeah. My brain is not working today. They're becoming much more popular, or they have been very popular for a little bit now. In the evil worlds, people are starting to use these good tools for nefarious purposes. So they're starting to get hammered a whole lot more. Their AV and EDR really going wild on detections. So let's pivot to something else that doesn't have a bunch of detections. Sliver has gained, Mythic is another one. There's a bunch of them that are out there. They're not the only games in town, but they are the ones that kind of have gained some popularity here recently. So I'm not surprised to see Sliver.
Is that Sliver something that team, that Bishop Fox Red team, they developed that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so now it's just kind of made its way into the wild.
Yeah.
And
it's open source.
Yeah.
So you can just go to GitHub and download it and rock with it. I've played with it. I've actually messed around with the idea of doing a tutorial on how to spin that up, work in the team server.
I thought Daniel was now going to confess to a crime. I'm like, all of this article's been about me.
Yeah. Oh man.
Just for clarity, that's not what happened.
No.
But that's what went through my. I was like, man, Dad, don't say it.
Yeah.
Plausible
the
deniability.
Company, the company itself, though, it did say we put out a patch. Everything was, comes with patching. Towards the end of the article is where they start to respond. Like, whoever reported this, they went ahead and just kind of reported it out there. It didn't seem like the company doesn't think that they got a chance to.
Oh, responsible disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird.
That's usually not a very cool thing to do. Because was it Rapid7 that discovered this, or was somebody Rapid7 reported on it first? I think.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I just remember towards the end of the article they were saying that the company was responding we were in the middle of sending out the patches, or people were updating, and then it got reported out there, and so they essentially gave a blueprint to everybody that was attacking to be able to get the attack in before the patch happened.
Yeah.
It was a message posted on their FTP server.
Yeah. So another cool thing about this, I was reading the Rapid7 post, and they were able to use another open source tool that a lot of red teamers and black hats alike tend to use. It's called WISO Serial. And it'll basically, you say, hey, here is the payload I would like you to serialize, and give me a serialized payload to feed into the machine so that it can deserialize it. So if you haven't checked that out and you're into offensive security type of things, red teaming, check out WISO Serial, and you can download that. It's free.
Cool. Yeah, I had mentioned it last week because we were talking about CrowdStrike, and I said I thought that was a tool for the good guys, and you said it's a tool for everyone.
It's a tool. Listen, I can take a garden hoe and kill people with it. That's not its intended function.
But it would work.
It would work. It would do the trick.
All right, let's jump over to our last article of the day. This one falls in our dope category. All right, sometimes people make mistakes. I've been there. I think we've all made a mistake at some point or another.
Flawless.
Yeah. Sinless perfection right here.
Sometimes there's just enough irony attached to it to make it almost comical, and yet sad at the same time. And that's what we have today in an article from cybernews.com. Cybersecurity company Darkbeam leaks billions of email and password combinations.
Say millions?
Billions.
Billions.
With a B.
Okay, what is this? You said cybersecurity?
Yes.
As in, that's what Darkbeam does?
Man.
That's it.
Gotcha.
That'll get you every time.
Hold on, Maury Povich is at the door, and he's got like a lie detector result.
Yeah. A digital risk protection firm.
Oh, they didn't protect themselves.
Yeah. Well, they're good at protecting you, not them.
Darkbeam has a couple of products, but one of the services that they offer is that they, I'm doing air quotes for listeners, monitor the dark web to look for credentials that have been harvested from websites in
like
breaches.
Data breaches and stuff. Yeah.
And the
kind of like Have I Been Pwned or whatever.
Yes. Very, very similar to that, right? Except unlike Have I Been Pwned that shares their information with the world, Darkbeams is private. And in my experience, and I do not have evidence that Darkbeam is doing this, but in my experience, the companies that have a private list like this are almost always purchasing credentials from the dark web, which there's ethical concerns around that. So let's just pretend for a moment that's not the case here, but it likely is.
Yeah, and so Darkbeam might be like getting their just dessert.
So Darkbeam has a collection of user credentials that have been compromised that is greater and different than that offered by Have I Been Pwned.
Darkbeam is like compromising people. That's how they're getting their lists.
I mean, that's the old mafia model, right?
The real horrible
really
thing
hate
got
this.
in here.
You know, I found this list of users and passwords. And, it'd be a shame if that got leaked on that dark web.
So the numbers now make sense because I was like, they don't have 3.8 billion customers. There's no possibility that
they
one
don't.
firm.
Yeah.
So that now makes sense if they were able to get a list from the dark web.
And so if you sign up with them, they have a service, and you can connect your Active Directory to them, or you can provide them a user list. And anytime your people turn up, they let you know, like, whoop, hey, there's been a breach that included this credential, reset the password. And honestly, that's a good service because you can reset a password before it gets used or whatever,
Hopefully,
right? When your credit card is stolen as part of a big breach, it takes a while for the attackers to get to your credit card, but they'll get there one day.
Unless you happen to be on the top of that list.
It can happen too. Yeah, it's a bit of a crapshoot.
They're number one,
So,
oh, why did you name me? You know, Andy Amos.
what was it in Hot Fuzz with Aaron Aronson?
Right. Why is that my name?
All right. Well, so we've kind of described the service at this point, and it makes sense. There's a number of companies that offer this type of solution. Where this one goes wild and gets us into our dope moment is an engineer or group of engineers over at Darkbeam had brought up an Elasticsearch and Kibana database, which is a very popular database solution for doing big data analysis and rapid searches of large data sets.
Jimmy Tango's weight loss program at the time.
And they didn't secure the interface. This is the old, I forgot
to lock the door.
Yeah, an S3 bucket, Mongo databases. You hear about these all the time.
What blows my mind is, I'm not, being that I didn't read the article, I asked a question before I said something. All right, I'm here for reactions.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm here for reactions.
We want raw reactions from Justin.
So was this they got inside their systems and then found this open endpoint, or was it just public?
It was public.
All right, so here's the sub. I don't know of any particular reason why I would need, unless it was a service I was selling, as an API.
Yeah.
I don't know of any reason that I would have an Elasticsearch Kibana cluster open to the internet, right? Because I'm trying to think, I'm like, all cloud lock it down. It can only originate from here. But I think that goes to show you it was probably someone inexperienced or not thinking of something. Or, hey, I use this old infrastructure as code module and it's for a public endpoint, which I don't do that.
It is things like this that make it difficult for people to get into cybersecurity because what's the one thing that, okay, I'm gonna get into a cybersecurity job. I got me some certs. I've done some CTFs. I've done X, Y, or Z to try to get in. And they go, cool, what experience do you have? It's because they're trying to avoid this kind of thing right here because they don't want to be, oh no, we let the new guy or girl put their hands on something and they totally borked it.
But I would argue with something this valuable, given what your company does, I hope it's not just one person.
Yeah. So this is why I'm a huge proponent of I think that there should just be apprenticeships. We should be doing more apprenticeship type things where, okay, cool, you've got all the certs, you've got all the, done all the things to prove that you have the ticket price paid to get into it. We're going to sit you over here with Joe, and Joe has been doing this for the last 12 years. And he is going to teach you how to build up a good methodology and a good workflow and do all the right things. And he's going to kind of put some training wheels on you for a year. And then we'll take the training wheels off and we can go. If we have more programs that did that, I think we'd see that cybersecurity skills gap really start to shorten.
I would even argue as even if you don't call them that's just an effective onboarding.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Because they learn trial by fire. Yeah, they learn by opening up your Elasticsearch or Kibana cluster to the public. And then you go, oh, man. Also, I thought maybe they're not purchasing. Maybe they're bartering. I'm like, hey, we got some new creds for you. You want some of these? I get some more.
So Daniel, where the argument starts to fall apart a little bit,
Yeah.
though, is when you look at like LastPass,
Yeah.
where it was one of their top 4 engineers that.
Well, no one's
Yeah.
perfect now, but it's like the just in general. These are all in generalities.
Yeah.
You would see an increase.
So let's assume for a minute that Darkbeam is on the up and up. That they've not purchased credentials, so it's stuff that they've acquired through various legitimate means, and then this is now leaked out.
Right.
At a minimum, this has given attackers a much easier database to use. Like when you brute force a password, here we've got several billion passwords that they can use to populate a library and possibly hit things much faster. They've got credentials they can try. It's all in a XML format that's like insanely easy to parse. Or
Is it JSON?
JSON. It's
I
JSON.
was like, XML.
Yeah. I was
Sorry.
like, whoa.
Yeah, I gotta,
Even if I happen to part, I'd be like, that sounds like a lot
I
of
gotta,
work.
gotta move forward a decade here. So it's all in a JSON format that's easy to parse and leverage in your tools. And
Still not the big one though. Still Rocky's still the king of the hill with like 8.4 billion
Yeah.
entries.
Well,
So 3.8. At least they can say well, we weren't the biggest.
yeah.
You're still pretty still pretty big breach.
I know that's a good sales point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we're not
Marketing.
Rock you.
Well, now, RockU, help me remember, aren't they like a sports company or something?
yeah, they were
Yeah.
like some online like sports system. I forget. I never used it.
Okay.
Only reason I ever heard of Rock You was because I found the list and was like, oh, this is useful.
Not even going to lie. In my mind, that doesn't even come to mind. RockYou.text. I go, yeah, I'm going to rock your world when I get inside here.
Yeah,
That's-
it was a website called Rock You.
Gotcha.
And that was their user base,
I'm trying to find.
which was massive.
and the website is no longer active,
Yeah,
so I don't know what
that-
they were.
Huh, that's
they-
weird. I wouldn't have expected them to be out of business.
But they weren't a cybersecurity company.
no, they
like
were not.
Darkbeam.
They were not a
That's-
cybersecurity company.
That's where this goes from a who got pwned to
Yeah.
a straight up dough.
Yeah.
Like, oof, big
Yup.
big whiff. That's tough, and I don't know. Darkbeam. I've seen them at conferences.
They're like, can you stop saying our name?
They've been they've been around a little while, so I don't know how this will impact them. Technically,
How did it impact LastPass from the last time they were at
Well-
a conference?
so here's the difference.
By the way, Justin, I know, uses LastPass.
Darkbeam has leaked credentials that were already compromised
Right.
versus LastPass leaked credentials
Right,
that were
So
not,
we're
compromised. LastPass's credentials were encrypted, though. The attackers are going to work at it.
Right.
Darkbeam aren't. So I don't, in my mind, I don't put Darkbeam at the same level
Yeah.
as LastPass, right? LastPass was a total debacle. But it's going to be embarrassing for them. I bet they can survive this, though.
Yeah.
I think it even though we've been joking and having some jabs and stuff, I do want to clarify, like, could have happened to me at any time, right? You're like, oh, I did these things. I think it's the after effects is like how it's going to affect them.
Right.
If they brush it off, I don't think that's going to brush it off. Maybe not be the word the phrase I'm looking for, but it depends on what actions they take, because that's not going to gather any sympathy, right?
Right.
If they can phrase it in a way of like, oh yeah, people make mistakes. No one's 100% perfect,
Right.
right? Those type things. Hopefully this isn't one of those things that we come back to 3 weeks from now and go, oh, we found out more. It's worse.
Yeah.
So
Depending on like what kind of credentials they end up finding in this disclosure, that's really kind of when it starts getting interesting. Because, I mean, you name just about any large company, even a lot of cybersecurity companies, and there's been some whoa-ohs.
Yeah.
So they're in good company when it comes to that. But what if it's like, well, we found President Biden happened to be in this disclosure, and now we have access to .govs and stuff. That would be nightmare scenario.
Do you remember the Ashley Madison breach?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
And that was a big, like, whose name's going to turn up
Yeah.
in there? And,
Yeah, because that's scandalous.
and we knew like politicians were going to come out of it, but they never did. Instead, we just got like Duggars or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that got covered up pretty well.
Yeah. Because that's how the government works, Don.
Yeah.
nah, government wouldn't do shady stuff. like that.
Transparency, that's what they're all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently so was this company.
Yeah.
Very transparent.
Yeah. Super transparent.
Accidentally. You're like, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Well-
are the most transparent company.
This is why things like OWASP exist.
Yep.
Yep.
Right? There are well-known attacks
Mhm.
that people still fall for year after year that we need to be aware of. So securing your S3 buckets, securing database, not providing open access to a database on the internet.
Doing security at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
you can
on the
start
list,
there.
by the way.
You can start there.
That is.
So which is worse? Is that they left it unsecure and it's kind of like something that any hacker out there would have actually tried to do initially, or is it one of those hacks where somebody has to take like weeks and weeks to discover that small vulnerability, and then they get in because it's a 0-day attack? What would be worse for a company?
I would
To
say
breach
this.
Yeah, that's what I would
where it's not
say.
secure.
So that's why I don't know. I'm not saying they aren't going to survive because I don't know how much that company had, but that's where I would kind of go as a customer. Like,
It's pretty big.
this is not.
Yeah.
This is not something that took a team of hackers like North Korea, to break in.
Little Johnny in a web browser found himself on your site.
Yeah,
here.
that's why I'm saying that. It's like I have no clue if that's really going to affect them that much, but
Don's
I think it
looking up their
could.
stock.
I'm curious how many employees they have. They're a London-based company. It says founded in 2017, so they've been around a little while.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to find an employee account.
I will say though, from if I was looking for passwords and stuff, this was like a pipe dream because it is Elasticsearch, and I'd be like, let me search for these.
Yeah.
I just want to search for stuff. Be like, all right, is my stuff in there?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. It comes back fast.
At Cabana.
Good performance.
Look at all these dashboards I made about all these passwords.
This is very nice. I mean, this is kind of a sales pitch here.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the horrible security, I'd be all about this.
So, just make sure your stuff's not public. Unless it's a website. Obviously, that has to be public.
Yeah. Did it say how fast they discovered the leak?
Don, I am getting pissed off for you.
Justin is watching me. I've just failed the human check twice on this website.
What you need is a robot arm that clicks the I am not a robot.
Apparently, I am AI or something because
Please try again.
It's one of those captchas where it says press and hold.
Yeah.
Like it's designed for mobile devices. So
Right,
I got to
yeah.
sit here and hold my stupid mouse. And then I get a check mark that says I'm human. And then it tells me it didn't work. And
You are the most human robot it's ever found.
I'm about to give up on this.
Oh,
game.
bro.
Mark
Yeah.
Zuckerberg over here.
Put that in a dumpster and set it on
We
fire.
will never know how many employees Darkbeam has. But they've been around 6 years. They've probably got to be around. Well, I don't want to speculate, but
Yeah.
who knows? All right. Well,
Have we
gents,
beat this horse?
I think we have.
Okay.
All right. I do want to remind people that that this podcast is brought to you by the fine folks over at ACI Learning. They make it all happen. And so if you're ever bored and have some time, be sure to swing by acilearning.com or the IT Pro TV website, itpro.tv, which actually goes to ACI Learning. So you can view the IT Pro product. If you want to learn more about cybersecurity or watch Daniel and Justin's OWASP Top 10 class, those things are available in the IT Pro library found on the website. You can subscribe. There's a deal. There's a coupon. There's stuff. Sophie
We give
knows
you
it all.
stuff off. Yeah.
30%.
30%.
If you go to,
Technado, right?
Technado.
go to technado.com and you will see a button right on there where you can subscribe with a
If you're gonna
discount.
see this, you see a butt.
Yeah, maybe. Depends on when you go, if we've been hacked that week or not.
That's typo squatting.
Yeah.
It's a whole different type of squatting.
Yeah.
But you can use code Technado30. Oh, come on, Ronnie.
No
that was
one's
a logical
listening to
joke.
this.
No, it just caught me. I was like, what? No, he did say-
Whoa,
yeah, he said that.
whoa.
How could I pass on that
I
one?
don't think you could, Don. It's the law, isn't it?
I know, it's right there.
It's like,
All right.
anyway, Technado 30.
There's some webinars coming up.
Yeah, I got one Thursday with Jason Downey from Red Siege. If you haven't heard of Red Siege, you're doing it wrong. So get out there, check Red Siege out, and check out all things cybersecurity coming out this Thursday. I believe it is at 2 p.m. of the Eastern time, if I'm not mistaken.
Sweet. Those are always a good time.
They are. Lots of
And,
fun. You get to actually ask us questions. So you register, and then the whole thing is just you asking questions and us answering questions.
And you learn a lot. And
That's the idea.
Yeah. Speaking of learning in cybersecurity, I have completely forgotten to mention again. Sophie would have got this.
She's good at her job.
It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Oh, yeah. That's right. It's
October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is like the worst Hallmark holiday ever. There's no cards at Walgreens or CVS.
Oh, man. That's an idea.
That is an idea.
We're going
Yeah.
to talk off.
Yeah.
Because We could send out some cards.
Congratulations on your breach.
Sorry you got pwned.
Is this your username and password?
Get
Enclosed
employed
as
soon.
a list of things
We
that you
could-
did incorrectly.
We could password spray with cards. Just like the top list of passwords. Like, is this yours? Check yes.
Boy, the people who drop out for the last part of the podcast are missing out today.
I really do. I
Um,
really do.
But it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and on our YouTube channel, which is primarily focused on Technado, we are going to be including a lot of little training bits that are drawn from the stuff we do in our day job. You'll definitely want to check it out. Things like the webinar, I'll make it on there. We have video content dropping every single day in October, which is awesome.
Wow.
So you definitely want to do that. And I don't have a spoiler yet for this one, but they're working on a Halloween special that should be fun.
Spooky.
So all stuff that's there. So if you haven't already, be sure. Now I got to be like one of those Paul brothers. Like and subscribe.
Subscribe.
Yeah, be sober.
Spooky.
like and subscribe.
John, put down that tequila
There's
bottle.
like a notify bell or something. You want to click that.
I am drunk.
I feel compelled to jump in. Like I'm like, Don, are you okay? Do we need to call somebody?
Yeah, our
Do you
next
smell
episode
toast?
is the intervention.
This is the best Technado ending ever.
We should just can this one and play it each week because I think I've fumbled it
I
enough to
like
really
it.
apply to any week.
That's right. That's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you listening. Be sure to check back in for whatever happens next week. If I'm still employed, we'll see you then. Have a great week.